This week's episode is pretty fascinating. Do you want you or your team to generate great ideas and deliver successful innovations? Well, I've been following this gentleman, Paul Sloane. He's based in the UK for a while now. His tweets actually always make me giggle. He really is the innovation king, and he has no shortage of not just expertise and stories and tools. He's actually got about, I don't even know how many books out there, and they've all been bestsellers about how to be a brilliant thinker, about how to be a lateral thinking, and really, about open innovation and so on. He really eats and breathes this stuff, and you can feel it. So we get to chat and sit down and talk, and it's amazing because we chat about the different areas around innovation. In this episode, you're going to discover not only what innovation is, and we define it, but the difference between curiosity and creativity and innovation, and different ways to measure innovation, because no one ever talks about that. They say the words innovation in an organization, but is it a buzzword or not? And he talks about different ways that companies have done that. How employees need to be idea generators, and organizations really need to kind of help transform that. Then we get into this really interesting discussion about risk takers versus risk avoiders, man versus women. And, I'll let you guys hear the debate in the discussion. It's really fun. And we talk about the innovation audit and so much more. But we really talk about how we as individuals can really apply these different things. And I can't wait for you to hear this episode because I think you're going to get a lot of value from it. Enjoy. Welcome to the Can Innovate podcast, the first ever podcast designed to showcase Canadian thought leadership. These innovators share industry insights, entrepreneurial best practices, lessons learned, and other tips that we can incorporate right into our lives, our careers, and our businesses. So let's get inspired. So I am really honored and excited. I get Paul Sloane, who is an experienced speaker, course leader, and a facilitator. He's a recognized authority on innovation and creative speaking. He gives and speaks at workshops to leading corporations around the world. This guy has it all, and of course, I'm all about the innovation game, so I had to get him on the podcast. He's also the best-selling author of How to Be a Brilliant Thinker, The Innovative Leader, The Leader's Guide to Lateral Thinking Skills, and an editor of A Guide to Open Innovation and Crowdsourcing, all published by Kogan Page. We got him, and we are really excited. So welcome. Thank you, Paul, for your time.
Great to be with you today, Sapna.
First of all, congratulations on all your brilliant books. I actually have been reading a little bit about your lateral thinking skills, and I just love your topic on innovation. You hit innovation in 10 different directions, and then you've got games and puzzles. You are the innovation king.
Well, that's very kind of you to say so.
How did it all start out? What inspired you to focus in this area?
Well, I've got a background in engineering. I worked for IBM for 11 years in sales and marketing. I was a marketing director, managing director, CEO of a software company. And along the way, I wrote a book of lateral thinking puzzles, which are all strange situations where you have to try to figure out what's going on. You probably know quite a few of them. And it sold very well. And I wrote, with my co-author, 20 more books of those. And I run a forum called the Lateral Puzzles Forum, where we people set and solve them interactively. And I got interested in how you'd use the same techniques for solving the puzzles to solve business problems. And I got interested in lateral thinking in business, not from a theoretical or academic point of view, but from a very practical point of view. How can you use these techniques of deliberately approaching problems from different directions in order to solve business problems? And I started speaking on lateral thinking and innovation in business. I realized the purpose of lateral thinking in business is to drive innovation. So I got pulled more and more into the innovation space and the leadership of innovation. And for the last 10 years, I've been doing this full time. I go around the world helping organizations improve innovation through my talks and workshops.
Oh, it's brilliant. What is absolutely brilliant. And what's really interesting is that I find that a lot of people have a really interesting concept and definition of what they think innovation is. Do you think you could kind of set the record straight? What is innovation from your point of view?
Very, very simple. Innovation is the implementation of something new. That's all it is. I wrote a blog, What's the Difference Between Creativity and Innovation? And it's had something like 200,000 hits. It's very popular. And basically, creativity is thinking of something new, and innovation is the implementation of something new. So if we thought of a fantastic idea today, like a banana milkshake curry or something, that would be creativity. And if you actually made one, that would be innovation.
A banana milkshake curry. That's impressive. I don't know where that creativity...
That's just the first thing I thought of.
I think that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And so how is this kind of a really different one? And then you kind of touch into this whole lateral thinking concept. What's that about?
Lateral thinking is a phrase coined by Edward de Bono, in contrast to conventional thinking where we go straight ahead, build block on block on block. Lateral means coming at the problem from the side. That's all it means. And it's about thinking about things in different ways. And there are techniques you can use to help you do this. And in my masterclasses and advanced brainstorm and leadership workshops, I get people thinking about problems in entirely new ways. So I'll take your team and get them to, and just displace them out of their comfort zone and get them thinking differently. And that's my promise, and that's what I deliver.
That's kind of cool. So they come think about things from sideways.
Yes.
So that kind of, so the types of workshops that you actually provide, so you are they just employees? Are they executives? Like, what are the types of problems that they're trying to solve that thinking sideways will help them kind of see it, but in a different dimension?
It's a business problem. So I help organize it. I prefer to get the senior leadership team together if I can, but very often they'll give me a team of enthusiastic young Turks, a real middle management, high potential, talented individuals, and they're terrific. And it might be, how can we launch a new product? How can we get more awareness? How can we break into a new market? Or how can we become more innovative? I very often get that one. What can we do to make our organization a hotbed of creativity and innovation? And we look at that. And we start by looking at what's impeding innovation in the organization today. And very often they're very similar things in different organizations, whether the public sector, private sector, charities. Typically it's similar things. We don't have enough time. We don't have any budget. We're not encouraged to do it. We're risk averse. People are happy to carry on doing the things we've always done. These sorts of things come up time and time again. And we can tackle those head on, and we generate ideas to change the culture.
So it's interesting that you bring that up, because, the whole cultural change and all those pieces are so fundamentally important. But what do employees need to do to kind of contribute a little bit more to the whole innovation space?
They need to be empowered, that's all. Most employees are keen to improve the organization. They are actually enthusiastic and they've got great ideas, and they're frustrated. So if you speak to the people at the top of the organization, the CEO and his executive team, they will say, innovation is really important for us. It's one of our core values. And we want people to try more things, and they're empowered to try more things, and we're comfortable with risk, and we're comfortable with failure. And then you speak to the people at the bottom in that same organization, and they say, we're not empowered at all. We're micromanaged. We're told what to do. Innovation's not in our objectives. We're not rewarded for it. If we screw up, we get the blame. My manager's totally focused on this quarter's objectives, and I've got to do my job. I've got no time for trying anything else. So there's a huge disconnect between what the people at the top want and say and what the people at the bottom actually experience. And it's understandable, because what gets in the way is business as usual. It's the day-to-day running of the operation, which takes 10 hours a day, 5 days a week for most people. And they've got no time or bandwidth. And people in the middle managers, are all measured on their goals and their KPIs, which are all about delivering the current objectives of the organization. And typically, they don't have an objective which says, find entirely new ways to do things, which is what innovation is all about. And yet they have people working for them who've got lots of great ideas.
It's crazy, because it's very true, and I agree that what you're saying. Like, people are measured on the goals and the KPIs. That's how they get their bonuses. people are incentivized in different ways. That's how they work. But how does one actually measure and track innovation in a company? Do you have any ideas and thoughts on that?
Yeah, lots. So there are various metrics you can use, and none of them are perfect. So a lot of companies use the percentage of revenue generated from products that were new in the last 2 or 3 years. And that's fine, but it's a backward-looking metric. So it tells you how good you were at generating ideas and implementing new things 2 or 3 years ago. It doesn't tell you what you're doing today. You can actually measure the pipeline of new products and ideas, especially if you've got an ideas scheme. You can see how many ideas are being contributed and how long it takes, in particular, how long does it take an idea to go from the original proposal to it being implemented? And that's the innovation pipeline, the length of that funnel. A very good metric is how many ideas you implemented. And I spoke at a conference for ideasuk.org, which is the association which helps people who've got ideas schemes, suggestion schemes. And there was a speaker there from Siemens Drives in Congleton in the north of England. And he said this, I was quite amazed. He said, last year we implemented 7 suggestions per employee. Our target this year is to implement 9 suggestions per employee. And they employ about 400 people. So they're really at the cutting edge, I would say. And they encourage everybody to make suggestions. And all of those suggestions are evaluated very, very quickly by other managers. If the suggestion gets an initial approval, the person gets a small reward. And if it's implemented and it's a huge saving, they don't get a big reward. They get lunch with the CEO and a picture on the wall and mention in the newsletter. And it works really well. So measuring ideas implemented per employee, I think, is one of the best metrics.
That is such a cool idea to do that. It'd be kind of hard because, you also want that idea of collaboration with employees too, right? So then it gets... And
you're adding together apples and oranges. One idea is, let's have a nice picture on the wall. Opposed to another idea is, let's break into the Chinese market. So they're really hard things to measure in that sense. And there's no perfect metric for innovation, but that you should attempt to measure it. You should attempt to measure your input metrics, what resources are we putting into innovation, what's in the pipeline, and what comes out, the output metric. So there's 3 components. And I've written a blog on this, which is a very popular blog. What are the best metrics for measuring innovation?
So for our audience listeners out there, I'm going to make sure I get all the links and make sure I put them into the show notes so that you have it at your fingertips. So it's interesting because, I love how you're talking about a lot of employees are so frustrated. I think I read a statistic, and it could be an American statistic, that 80% of employees are disengaged.
I've seen that. So I find that hard to believe, but it's just some huge number. Yes.
Yeah. I know it throws me for a loop because I'm like that level of disengagement. And then it goes back to you talking about, employees are like, well, I'm not encouraged. I'm supposed to do this, the day-to-day stuff.
Yes.
And then it gets me thinking about, executives have this vision that they know that they need to be more competitive. They really need these hotbeds of ideas in order to not be disrupted in the marketplace because things are happening all over the place. And then it makes me start to think, is there kind of areas that we need to help develop our middle managers, that new leadership, leadership of tomorrow, in order for them to cultivate? Is there kind of a mindset total gap that's happening in at that age?
Well, it's all leadership. It's all about leadership. It's absolutely a leadership issue, and it has to start at the top. The only person who can change the culture of an organization is the leader. You can't really change the culture from the bottom or the middle, I don't think. It's hard enough from the top, let alone. But you often see new CEOs trying to do this and change the culture, and it can be done over a period. And what you've got to do is reward the behaviors you want to encourage and punish the behaviors you want to stop. And they do this by calling out action. So a very powerful thing for a leader to do is to praise somebody at a town hall meeting for trying something that failed, for instance. And this very rarely happens. They normally praise people who've launched some new product and made a big sale and something which is very clearly worth celebrating. Very rarely do they say, Joe here tried something new, it didn't work, but that's exactly the sort of initiative I'm looking for. Another powerful thing the leader can do is to talk about their own failures in their career. And when I was, a salesman, I tried this and it didn't work, but I learned this lesson. And we launched this product and we completely screwed up when I was on this team, and we learned this. And people say, wow, he's telling us about the things that went wrong. He's not boasting about all the things that he did right, he or she. So these sorts of methods can change a culture from being risk averse to being more adventurous.
And I'm going to guess that it also increases the level of trust in an organization too.
Yes.
You know, that level of trust and transparency when someone's saying, hey, I tried this, didn't work. You know, next time I'm going to try it a little differently, or if anyone has ideas, like it's a different kind of conversation, like talking to people versus talking at them. Yes.
Trust and empowerment go together very, very closely. And it's the leader's job. I recommend that you give everyone 2 jobs. You say, do your current job really well and find an entirely different way to do it. And at the end of the year, when you're going doing people's appraisals, you should appraise them on how many new initiatives they've introduced. You did a great job. You managed the process. You met your main objectives, but what new ideas did you champion? What new initiatives did you facilitate and encourage? And if they didn't have any, you mark them down a little for that. And then the message gets across, hey, they're looking for more than just doing the job. To succeed here, to really break through, you've got to be an idea generator. You've got to be an innovator. You've got to be someone who's a go-getter in terms of changing things. And you've got to be a bit of a risk taker. And you've got to encourage people to do that. And there's some evidence that men are better at risk taking than women. Women tend to be rewarded for being precise and getting the job done really accurately. Men tend to be rewarded more for boldness and risk taking. And that's possibly one of the reasons why more of them end up in senior positions.
No, it's interesting because women tend to be a lot more of planners, you know,
Yes.
and we overly plan. I was watching an episode, and this is actually because I lived in the UK with Dr. Sir Alan Sugar. He had The Apprentice.
Yes.
And for the listeners out here, it's basically The Normal Apprentice. It just happens to be Sir Alan Sugar, and he's got a British accent, and he's kind of cuter. But he has always this game that he plays about negotiation, and he breaks, I don't know if you've seen that, he breaks the groups up into men and women.
Yes.
And the idea is they have a laundry list of things they need to buy. So they have 10 things, and there's penalties for not getting it, and they have to do it on time within a certain budget. And I always laugh at this episode because every time it's same thing happens. The men win over the women. Now, the women end up getting all 10 items. They get it on time. They get everything. But the men, they go and try different techniques, and they kind of prioritize and do other things. So, for example, one of them was you had to buy a canoe. So the guy goes to a toy store to go buy a canoe because they didn't actually give more levels of specifications. Does it actually have to be a real life canoe? So you still saved hundreds of dollars. And yes, they got a penalty. But they were thinking a lot more differently and creative based on the parameters that was there. But it was really interesting. Like, even though the women every time get all 10 items on time and they tried their best to negotiate, you know, a good dollar, they were thinking a lot more differently of like, I want to keep the maximum money.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I said, and it's very dangerous to generalize, but I will go. Women do better at university than men. They pass the courses better, and then they go into work and they think work's like a bit like university. You just do the work and do it really well. And men are really good at games and playing games, video games, and anything competitive. And they treat work more like a game, and sometimes that works better.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. And it's funny because there's this man here, his name, we call him Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary. He's a real big financial guru out here. I'm not sure if he's made it out there in the UK, but he always talks about, he's on these types of shows like Dragon's Den, you know, Shark Tank. And what it is that he always says he loves investing in companies with women as leaders because he always gets a really great ROI back from them.
Yes.
Their sales estimations are so, like, on the conservative side that they always beat them. So he says he always makes more money from these females that are running these companies because men tend to come up with overarching big, high goals that are really, but he says I make more money with the, female leaders that are running these companies and so on. It's interesting because it shows how if we can actually get teams and people to work a little bit more together, the skills and the different dimensions, you could come up with really great hybrid ideas.
Yeah, diverse teams are really important in innovation. And a lot of companies make the mistake of hiring people for a cultural fit, as they call it. And that's code speak for we want young people. We don't want older people. We want people who fit with our culture. And they look for some white faces and some black faces, and then they think we've got diversity. But diversity isn't just about ethnicity or gender. It's about different opinions, different ideas, different thoughts. And there's considerable evidence that teams that get on well together are much less creative than teams where there's some contention. You don't want a team that's arguing all the time, but you don't want a team that's agreeing all the time either. You want a team where there's constructive dissent, where people are disagreeing because they want to see a better solution. And from the people rubbing up against each other just a little bit, you get better ideas, and ideas get refined and improved. Whereas if everyone says to the boss, great idea, boss, let's do it, it just goes through on the first pass, and it never goes through the process of the refinement and feedback, which it needs to become a much better workable solution.
No, I love that. I totally agree with that because, we're just watching the Raptors win, the basketball thing. It talks about really a strong team cohesiveness. None of them, they come from different backgrounds, different challenges, different whatever, but it's about learning to see what each other's strengths and weaknesses are, how we complement, challenge, play the devil's advocate to see what we could do to elevate things. Like I was explaining to Paul earlier that I had a bit of a late night, and by the time this episode airs, it's the whole game, the whole energy of the game will be gone. But it kept me thinking about what leaders and organizations can learn about teams and building great teams, and it's about that feeling. And if people feel that they have a place that they can safely speak and have ideas, that, yes, they may get challenged, but it's getting challenged for the right reasons as opposed to a competitive reason or making someone feel dumb, it's actually a lot more productive. And it's just having that confidence and having that place that people can just kind of, well, what if we did this, or what if that, and play that game so we can come up with some new things.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned about cultural fit. I was going to ask you, so I don't know what the trend is in the UK, but out here in North America, they keep revamping the offices to these open plan concepts and, bring in a fuse ball and a video game and an arcade and, wines on Thursday nights, as well as giving people empowerment to work from home because we talk about work-life integration as opposed to balance and so on. Do you think these things and techniques that they're trying to bring in, in the workspace really beneficial, or is it just kind of another kind of PR stunt?
I think they're largely cosmetic, but they don't do any harm. So nice, very nice to have. But if you've got the fundamental things wrong, that's not going to fix it. So if you do an innovation audit and ask people what's impeding innovation, and they say we're not empowered, we're not trusted, we don't have time, then giving them a table tennis table and a nice sofa and a pizza on a Thursday isn't going to solve the problem. If the problem is we don't communicate between departments and we work in silos, then bringing together people for a pizza and beer on a Thursday night actually is a good idea, provided they don't sit in their departments still. So it doesn't do any harm, but you've got to tackle the fundamental things first, which is it in people's objectives? Is it a priority? Are people allocated the time and the space to try things? And if they try things and fail, is that allowed in the organization? Is it a learning organization, or is it a blame culture? And you have to understand what's impeding innovation in the organization today, remove those barriers, then you can add all the nice to have cosmetic things. And they're not harmful, but they're not necessarily the solution if you've got fundamental problems in place.
Oh, brilliant words. So what's next, do you think, for the word innovation? I mean, it's such a huge buzzword. Is it kind of being overused, and it's kind of, do we need to come up with a new innovative word for innovation?
Yes, we do. You're absolutely right. Innovation is badly overused. So when you hear government ministers talk, every piece of spending is an investment. All right. So they don't say we're spending lots of money on maintaining things. They say we're investing, all right, in the children's future and in health. It's all about investment. So every piece of spending, and similarly, every change is an innovation. We talk about it as being a good thing. But of course, there's different types of innovation, and there's lots of money being spent on things which aren't really innovative. So it's hard. So I coined a couple of new words which haven't taken off. And one was radivation for radical innovation. And the other was increvation, which is incremental innovation. So when you just change a product wrapper and bring out a new flavor, that's an incremental innovation. When you do something radically different, that is a radical innovation. And those are much more difficult to do and seen much less often, much riskier, and very often they fail. But those are important concepts.
So you've got all of these books that you've written.
Yes, I've got some of them.
There's so many. It's unbelievable. Like, I love
The Leader's Guide to Lateral Thinking Skills is now in its 3rd edition. Highly recommended.
I'm telling you, that's the one I'm currently reading right now. And there's just so many things that make you kind of stop, pause, and think, and kind of reflect on the other companies that I've seen, and I'm like, wow.
As well. Think like an innovator.
It's brilliant. I mean, those business lessons that you are cultivating, it gives people, and not just people, it gives everybody almost like a benchmark, a baseline of a vision, and that they can kind of, go, oh, wait, that's what is an idea. Okay, that's as simple as that. Like, you give people the tools to kind of envision something, and then they can kind of elevate it a little differently and whatever it is. And it's important because there's not a lot of books that really do that. Like, they talk about it, they talk about the importance of it, but they don't actually illustrate it in a way. Like, it's kind of really crazy that way. So I really applaud you. I think these books are really amazing. Like, I think I am going to end up being a Paul Sloane, groupie by all means if I keep reading the books the way I do. But, these stories that you share, these are coming from examples that you've seen out in the workplace, or where did those come from?
Well, I gather them as I go around, and I love finding stories which illustrate lateral thinking in business. I've got a LinkedIn group called Lateral Thinking in Business, and we share stories there about things which are really effective. And I was just reading about a Canadian songwriter called Dave Carroll. You probably know this story. And he had a problem with United Airlines, who damaged his guitar when he flew from Halifax to Nebraska. And he complained, and he spent 9 months trying to get compensation. He got nowhere. He absolutely got nowhere. He was running into a dead-end brick wall. And so he composed a song. He used his talent, what he was good at. He used an entirely different approach. And the song wasn't called Airlines Ruin Passengers Experiences or United Damages Baggage. It was United Breaks Guitars. 3 words. Very, very specific and very intriguing. And he posted it on YouTube with a bit of a humorous video. And after 2 years, it got 10 million views. It went viral. It was a PR disaster for United. They tried to compensate him. But by that time, he'd become a speaker on the circuit and a big celebrity on TV shows because of this. And it's the point is, if you're stuck in one method, if it's not working, try something completely different. If you're bashing your head against a brick wall in any line of life or work, then come at the problem from an entirely different direction. And there's a good chance things will certainly be different, and very often they'll be better.
I love that. I love that. I know. I've got to go check out the video now because it's
on YouTube. It's got 19 million hits. Just search for United Breaks Guitars.
Oh, I love it. I'm going to totally do that. I'm going to add that to the show notes. And then if you start seeing me walking down the street humming a new song, we know what it is. So that's kind of crazy. So
you should interview him.
Oh, I should actually. That'd be kind of interesting to kind of see what. I guess you get so frustrated that you've got nothing to lose, which goes back to makes me think about employees, about what would they do if they weren't afraid? Like, if they were going to get fired anyways, what would they do to change things? And
you have to lose your fear of losing your job. You have to be prepared to say to bosses, I think there's a better way to do things. I'd like to try it. And be prepared to fall flat on your face. hopefully you'll be in an organization where that's allowed and encouraged, and they help you and pick you up and you try again. Because great innovators, they make a lot of mistakes. Roger Federer serves double faults. So does Rafael Nadal. They don't get every shot in, but they go for their shots. And that's how they win.
I think it's probably is a lot of that fear is coming from the fact that they know automation is coming, which honestly was the next evolution of things anyways. It was no surprise. So when you talk about, but then there's also additional aspects of talking about things being outsourced, and there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions and all those competing factors that I'm wondering if they're thinking if they stick to the job description, they're sticking, under the radar itself, and maybe that's why they kind of keep in a safe place. Is that kind of what your kind of spidey senses?
There's an element of that. Certainly in the public sector, people say that no one ever got fired for doing their job well. So the tendency tends to be keep your head down, do your work really well. You'll probably get promoted. If you try some major new initiative and it wastes a lot of public money, you might get fired for it, or you'll certainly get a reputation as a bit of a risk taker, and you don't want that. And yet we desperately need innovation in the public sector. We desperately need to find new and better ways to do things, and that involves trying things that don't work. So it is difficult.
You are so brilliant. So any last advice that you can give us to be bold and be innovative? Any words of courage?
Yeah, just say to yourself, there's a better way to do what I'm currently doing. I just haven't found it yet. There's always a better way. If the question is, can we find a better way to do this? The answer is always yes.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And finally, how can our listeners connect with you? You've talked about, we've got the book, you mentioned about a group that you also have. So how can we all get it?
On Twitter, I'm at Paul Sloane. So just PaulSloane, at Paul Sloane, you'll find me. I've got 42,000 followers. I'd love to add you as a follower. I tweet about 20 times a day with lots of my articles and blogs. My website is Destination Innovation. So if you search for destination-innovation.com, that's my website, and there's lots of resources and materials there that you can use.
You are brilliant. I'm already following you because I just think your tweets are hilarious. It's not just all these different links. Like sometimes your words of observations for the day are awesome.
You're too kind, Satna.
Yeah, they're just too fun. But I'll definitely put everything in the show notes, and the listeners can easily just get in touch with you because I think there's a lot to learn. And honestly, your books are brilliant. Like I said, I think one day when we meet face to face, I'll be asking for your autograph on a couple of them.
No, I'd love to give it to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Paul. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Satna.
Thank you so much for joining and listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode or any other episode, please share with your friends and colleagues. You can share on social media, the email link, the newsletter, and so on. Let's continue to support these Canadian innovators and help them really grow into bigger brands. Awareness and knowledge is totally key. Anyways, I can't wait to talk to you next week. Cheers.